Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most? And do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right, no extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
All right, welcome to the Wealth Flow. My guest today is Jeffrey. He is the founder of Equine Biomechanics and Exercise Physiology, which helps NWI and entrepreneurs looking to get into horse racing business pick and manage young, unraced thoroughbred horses who may then become champions. So, Jeff, welcome to the Wealth Flow.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited about this subject. Like I had mentioned ahead of the show, we haven't had anybody on with a tie to horse racing. So I'm very excited to dive into that. But if we could maybe start with your background, kind of where you grew up and what eventually led you into this industry.
Okay, I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia. And I was a wrestler, and I went to Harvard. And
Okay.
I was pre-med and psych, and I didn't know anything about horses. I didn't ride. My sister loved horses and rode. And then I went to Peace Corps in Africa. And before that, I went to night school. While in my last year at Harvard, I went to a local high school night school in auto mechanics, and I was a mechanic in Africa at Peace Corps for a couple of years, which taught me an enormous amount about, we didn't have any parts, so we had to fix things and make stuff. And I later used that in medical devices that we invented and patented and became widely marketed and innovative stuff. Anyway, so then I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I call it that because it's with horses now. And so I decided I needed to have law and business. I was type A, as you might imagine, and an overachiever. And so I applied to the business schools and the law schools way back in the 70s before they had a joint program. And I got into both and asked them, could I do both simultaneously? And they said, well, you'd probably get divorced or have a nervous breakdown or drop one of them, but you can do it. And I did. And then in my last year, I had to do, actually, it was a little before that. I went on a blind date with a girl, and she took me to a rental horse stable, a riding stable out in the suburbs. And instead of falling in love with the girl, I fell in love with the horse. And away we went. And I started taking lessons, and I bought a horse, and I moved out of the country and commuted in. And I really wanted to do something with horses. But I didn't know how I could do that. I didn't have the money. I was too big to be a jockey. I had no contacts. I didn't know anything about it. Didn't see how I could earn a living. Anyway, I had to do a thesis that combined business and law for the business and law programs. And it got to be about March of my senior year. And my advisor was Archibald Cox. You may remember from the Midnight Massacre with Richard Nixon. And probably before, I don't know if it's before your time. It's not before mine. But he was a famous guy, and his office was in the stacks at Harvard, way back in the middle of some dusty area with stacks of bookcases and everything. He had a desk there. I had to go see him. And he says, well, how's the project going along? And I'm kind of looking at the floor, and he gets the general idea. I haven't done squat. So he says, I thought he was going to throw me out and give me a lecture, but he says, well, what are you interested in? And I kind of looked at the floor and I said, horses. I thought that will do it. But it didn't. He turned around, he took this big book out from the behind him, and he plops it on the table and the dust goes all up. And he says, this is the statute that governs horse racing in Massachusetts. I don't think anybody here has ever looked at that. Why don't you do that? So I did, and I went crazy with it. I went to the archives in the basements in the capital of Massachusetts, and I studied, and I found out all kinds of dirt on the racetrack financially and the racing. I read all those books, and I ended up getting an A, and I loved it, but I didn't. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do something, I want to be outside and I want to work with horses, but how the hell am I going to do that? You know, and I took a job at Citicorp at International Finance. I was going to go back to Africa and help people start or fund stuff. Took a job at those days with the Go-Go International Banking with Citicorp. And they had an atrium, their new building at 3rd and Lex somewhere. I think it was like 53rd and Lex or something on 3rd Avenue or whatever. But anyway, and there was a big atrium, 3 or 4 stories high with their cafeteria. And all the walls, 3, 4 stories high, was a mural of Pennsylvania farmland. And every day at lunch, I was looking at it. And one day I looked at it and I said, what am I looking at it for? I could be living. Within a week, I quit. And I rented a farm in Pennsylvania. And I thought, I'm going to take all this medical and financial and business knowledge I have, expertise, and I'm going to try and bring it to horse racing where they do everything the way it was 300 years ago. And I was inspired because it was in 1976, the East Germans burst on the Olympic scene and they're winning all these medals. It used to be all Russia in the United States. And they freaked everybody out. And they thought it was sports medicine and doctors in kindergartens and all this stuff. It turned out to be steroids and things. But anyway, So they created, the United States wanted to create that kind of a sports medicine committee and foundations to do research. And I was a young lawyer and I knew the coach for this figure skating team. So I got hired to help out with that. And I got an eyeful and I ended up working with them, literally going to the Lake Placid Training Center in the middle of the winter and filming and high-speed film, learning biomechanics stuff from the professors involved. I had to a fight with a coach for the East German team. We were trying to figure out, one of our first big successes, but we were trying to figure out why the United States was never, ever even contention in the bobsled. Huh. But the East Germans and the Swiss always were. And people were spending like $1 million on the sled, but that didn't make any difference. So we went, and I took a camera, 500 pictures a second. There was no video high speed then, less than a few $100,000. And I went up there and I was at the top and I was filming their teams. So we could what do you call it? We could benchmark that to our team, right? And so the East German guy knew what I was doing. So he stood in front of me. Now, at that year, I had qualified for the Olympics as a wrestler. I didn't make it, but the guy who did won the gold medal. Anyway, so he kept standing in front of my camera. I kept, moving. And finally he wanted to push me in the camera, right? And so, he didn't get very far with that. I had him, down the slope on his ass pretty quick. And what I learned was, it was not the sled. And we were hiring professional football players to push the sled and stronger guys. And that had nothing to do with it. What it had to do with was the East Germans had like a ballet. Everything was synchronized. Outside leg, inside leg, outside everything. There was no wobble to the sled. The wobble at your speed at the beginning gets exponentially increased as you go down the thing. So it's critical. And if there's any wobble, it's friction and it really ruins your run. So these guys were perfect. So I said, you don't need professional football players. You need ballet dancers pushing the sled at the beginning. Anyway, that year they were in contention. And I think it was 4th or 5th, and it got good from there. So that was one of the big breakthroughs. And I learned that the difference between what we were studying on elite athletes and what they did and normal and injured and sick, it was as big a difference in the data between injured or sick and normal as there was between elite athletes and normal. So you had to go get that data if you wanted to make a difference. And a lot of I learned, and so I decided I would do that with the horses. And if I had known how long it would take and how much it would cost, I probably would never have done it. Because it took 20 years and several $1 million of my own money I had to earn otherwise doing businesses successfully before I could crack it and actually have some success, which I'll tell you about. And so I had to, not only did the data not exist on elite racehorses, or on regular racehorses, but the equipment to get the data didn't. You couldn't get an accurate heart rate because they had heart rate meters for humans, and they didn't work on the horses because they have all this fur and they have electrical activity to twitch off flies. And we had to invent electrodes. We had to invent chips to take, before personal computers, to take the signal autocorrelation function on the QRST EKG signal so we could get the accurate heart rate and the size of a pack of cigarettes with a jockey. And then we went to the cardiologists and the leading cardiologists in the veterinary community, and they told us what we would find. And it was all wrong. They said its heart's much bigger, so it won't go as fast, and it won't be able to go up and down. And their hearts go much faster. And they can go from a resting rate of like 25 to 120 like that. And it doesn't look like they turned a hair. And they can be going 250 beats a minute coming up the track. And then we learned about interval training. We tried it and it turned out to be ridiculous, because they use their lungs. This is a good story. They put the mask on and the VO2 max and all this stuff. We had the horse in a pool so we could get it all. And we had a spirometer. It's a great big water heater thing that catches all the gases that they use for that test. And it filled up in like 2 seconds. So we chained another one, fills right up, another one. Then we looked at each other and said, what's wrong with this? So it got a weather balloon to catch the gases that we were going to analyze. And then we said, this is ridiculous. If they're moving that much air, why are we trying to build their lung capacity? They don't need it. Why are they moving so much air? Because they're like dogs. They pant, and thermoregulated cools them, not just sweating, which they do a lot of. And they're a big animal with a lot of mass. So they move a huge amount of air. So interval training makes them lame and dull and doesn't do anything for their lung capacity. And then we looked into the blood doping, that the East Germans were cheating and using red blood cell blood doping before races, injecting themselves. And so we looked at that, and we found out that the spleens of the horses are so big that when they start off at the beginning of the race and they squeeze their spleen, they put almost 50% more or more red blood cells extra into their bloodstream. So the evolution of having to go from zero to run away from the wolf, has given them, a way to blood dope themselves naturally. And it went from there. We kept finding out new things, so that a lot of the sports medicine of Olympic athletes could not be adapted to the horses or the drugs. We had to invent the machine. We looked at their hearts, and we ended up inventing the first with a PC and black box defense contractor stuff, a way to go into the stall with a horse and get the size and the pumping capacity and the thickness of the walls of the heart. And again, everybody told us how to do, the experts. And we ended up on the other side of the horse with different megahertz transducers and a different machine, which now is standard procedure in everything. That's what they use. They use our protocol and that machine we invented. And it went on from there. And we were piling up data, high-speed film, and every 500th of a second of them running. We finally came to the conclusion the training was only important to hold them in one piece. But the elite horses were so different than the average horse that was the way to go, find them when they're young. And so, and I was passionate about it. I had a day job, but I was spending enormous amounts of time and money and hiring the best people from MIT and Harvard Medical School and the Olympic Committee and everything. We were going at it full bore, and it was going nowhere until I met Patty Miller. I was trying to break this yearling I had, and instead he broke my arm, kicked on the driveway, bucked me off. So I hired somebody, and she was a local person. She was a champion amateur steeplechase rider. She had worked for some of the leading trainers in the world, and she really knew her stuff. She'd been riding since she was 2 years old. So she was what we needed. I mean, all the tech was crap until you did the basics right. And she put that in there. And so like I say, I look at the altimeter, and she looks out the window to see if we're off the ground. Anyway, so then things started to pop. And we got to work with Billy Turner, who had goddamn phone. I'm sorry, I'll turn it off. Who had Seattle Slew, the phenomenal Triple Crown winner. He let us work in his barn with him. And let's see, where was I in this story? I've forgotten my goddamn phone. How I got our start. So then I was making presentations, and the good old boys in Kentucky didn't want any part of it, really. And I was obnoxious and arrogant anyway. I needed Patty to make the context, I went to one of the guys who perennially was a leading owner and breeder in racehorse business, a guy named Ken Ramsey, a real gentleman and an entrepreneur. He got his money winning a bed for cell towers in Atlanta or something. And he was legendary. And I went, he had 200 horses, and I made my presentation. And he listened. He said, I'll tell you what, I had 200 horses. Look over all my horses and make me a recommendation. Just one. I said, no, you don't understand. It's not one thing. It's bad. He said, no. Just make me a recommendation and I'll see what I think. So I did it. And I said, okay, this horse, Nolan's Cat, you're trying to make a new stallion, just Catiensis. It's named after your grandson, Nolan. I said, I want you, in about a month or so, I want you to enter him in the Belmont Stakes, one of the biggest races in the world, most prestigious Grade 1 classic. If you win that, you got a stallion, and your stallion's important, and the mare's worth a lot. And he burst out laughing. He said, that horse hasn't won a race. He can't even win the short, crummy races. He's a maiden, for God's sake. I said, yeah, but in the big races and all the races on dirt almost in America, when you see a horse making a big move at the end, he is not speeding up. He's just slowing down less than the others. They're all slowing down. I learned that in the Olympic swimmers. They slow down and they fix a logarithmic fatigue curve of how they slow down. And it's pretty much unique to them. And if you can then extrapolate that out to see what their time would be for a longer distance. So that horse isn't fast, but he doesn't slow down. It's got a flat fatigue curve at the end of 1.5 miles, which is the Belmont Stakes, which none of those other horses have run yet. And almost none of the races are that long. He's going to be right there. And then you're going to have a stallion that had, out of his first crop, had a classic horse, and you're going to have a horse that could become a stallion. So he said, okay, and he entered him. He spent a lot of money to enter them. And so we get there, and the trainer, who's a famous trainer, makes it clear to everybody that he's being forced to do this and he doesn't want it and it's not his fault. And the night before in the Daily Racing Forum, they said, okay, this horse is good and this guy and this about that horse, blah. Then there's the jokers and the idiots, and that was us, right? They never apologized. So anyway, so finally I think I'm going to have to hide under the table, and I'm there. And they come out of the gate, and sure enough, he's dead last. He's like 20 lengths last. And I'm thinking, oh, shit, this is my shot. And then about halfway through the race, he starts to pick up horses. And he's picking up horses. And we get to the 8th pole near the stretch, and he's flying, and he's passing horses. And they get to the end, and he's another couple of jumps he would have won. He was third. So now they've got a horse third place in a classic race, right? And just to prove it wasn't a fluke, they entered him in the $1 million Louisiana Super Derby after that. And he did the same thing, And so he said, okay, you're hired. So I started to work with him, but he wanted me to do, measure his horses. He's just let me do like tests and things and give him data. It still wasn't what I wanted. And then a guy along came. I got a phone call out of the blue from a guy who just started racing like a year ago. He saw us, I don't know how he found out about it. He was from Egypt, and he was smart as hell, and he was passionate. And he said, can you help me? And I said, yeah, I think so. He says, I'm going to spend $40 million. And I said, terrific. He's like, I can make a living. Anyway, so, and within 3 years, he was the leading stable in the United States, spending a fraction of what his competitors were spending, especially the Arabs. And then in about year 5, he had the first Triple Crown winner in 37 years, American Pharaoh. And then the Arab Spring came along, and the Egyptian pound got devalued 50%. And all his business connections were with the army, who was then out of the government. And he's had trouble. So he's got in trouble with his other businesses, and he ended up going bankrupt. So I lost that client. And since then, we're kind of trying to get somebody to replace him. But his $40 million was turned into $64 million before he got the Triple Crown winner, who was, north of $50 million. So whatever his problems were, it wasn't our fault. And he was a real character, but he was smart enough. He helped manage those horses, and together we just crushed it. And so if you want to own a professional team, if you got the money, you want the social milieu and all that action and all the goings on of being a big professional sports guy. In football or the NBA, it'll cost you north of $1 billion. In horse racing, you do it for 20 million. And so there's going to be somebody else like that Egyptian that's going to come along. And it's not a theory anymore. We've already done it. Does that mean everybody knows who we are? I mean, most people are afraid of us because they think we only work for the really big guys. And the established guys, man, we're the disruptor. We're a pain in the ass because the number one thing is pedigree. And all their inventory and the value of stuff, everything's pedigree, pedigree, pedigree. We come along and say, well, in the Olympics, we didn't test the parents. So I don't give a shit about the pedigree. And that makes me a heretic. So there you are. I don't know if that covers some of what you wanted to hear. I go on and on. You can tell I love it. So I love sure. You know what? I did it I wanted to work with horses. I love it. I love the baby horse. I live in a horse farm. The baby horses in the spring, we got fawns coming out of the woods and making nose to nose with the baby foal. And it's just good. When I was younger, I was a good athlete, and I used to ride the horses. I used to exercise the racehorses out in turf gallops, 200 acres of turf gallops. And so there it is. My dad, after I get out of Harvard, I was like in the top 2% of my class or something. He was disappointed that I chose to do horses, but and it certainly was a mess. And I didn't succeed till after he died, I was sorry because I thought he maybe thought I squandered my life. But I've changed the industry. Even the guys who don't use us, they try to copy some of our stuff. And we've published a lot in refereed scientific journals. But I say, so what? I can give them the violin and the instruction manual. They don't have Patty Miller, and they don't have, they're not gonna play a symphony with that violin and that manual. We got 20, 30 years of experience figuring out how to make this work. And you're no one technology. People fall in love with the greatest this or the greatest gait or the longest stride or the biggest dart or the best. It's all bullshit. You're not really looking for the best one thing. You're looking for where's the whole. There's so many variables at work, including their attitude, which is also important. I have a story about that. When Hialeah was in 30 years ago, when its peak in Miami, and they had velvet couches in the grandstand, bronze stages of horses, and the best races in the world. I was there and there was a race, not very good horses in that race. And usually at the end of the race, their horses are all stretched out from the 8th mile all the way to the finish line. It's like 600 to 800 feet apart. And a dog got out onto the track at the stretch. Nobody knows how. And started chasing the horses up the stretch to the finish line. And when they got there, they were all you could have thrown a blanket over all 10 of them. They were all that tight. And I never forgot that. I said, wow, that's what happens when they're all trying. So there are no free agents there. And there's ways to tell who's dominant. For example, we've bought more than one champion as babies, a lot of them, and not for a lot of money, for under 100,000. And the details are at our website, eqb.fyi, not .com. Anyway, there was one, we went to the farm and they had a bunch, I don't know how many yearlings, and 20 or 30 in the pasture, and they're bringing them in for dinner. And so we go out to there and they're all coming up to the gate so they can come in and have their dinner. And then the Red Sea parts and this filly walks up. And I thought, if that isn't a dominant animal, I'll be a monkey's uncle. We bought but she had to pass everything else. And of course she did. But she became a phenomenal racehorse. And her name was Madcap Escapade.
Huh.
How appropriate.
Right.
So, there was another one we brought out of a field. He was the only one with his tail still long. All the others had the tail. They bite each other's tails. They bite the tails off. So all the others had short tail, not him. We named him Club Fighter. And he wasn't a great horse, but he was a trier. He was a fun racer.
Yeah.
So
on the equipment and everything, as you're kind of building this stuff, you'd said a lot of the stuff you had to end up inventing in order to find out some of these things.
We had to build the databases. We had to build the heart rate meter. We had to build the ultrasound machine that did the heart So you could go in. They didn't have portable ones. You had to go to a hospital with this big machine back then. And then we had to figure out how to use the gait data, what was important. And I used to, at that point, I would take all the data, and I had a friend of mine who went through Harvard Medical School, and I would go up and we would take this huge disc, and we would go in Mount Sinai Hospital's huge IBM computer room, room full of computers. And we'd go up there in the midnight shift from midnight to 7 a.m. We would analyze our data using University Stat Pack, and then we'd be off by 7 a.m. and we never got caught. So, but
awesome.
it was a serious process. It wasn't obvious. I mean, a lot of the trainers say, "Oh, I can see that." I'm thinking, bullshit, you can. That's why, we go to a sale, and there'll be like 10 horses. It'll be go for a lot of money. And, 5 of them, you couldn't give me. I wouldn't for 5 cents, I wouldn't take them. So the other 5, they can see, but they can't see what I see, but the other 5 have it all. But that 5 I can help my guy dodge the bullet, and we can concentrate our money on the others. And some of them, it's not obvious what they do. I see all the time, 300,000, 400,000 for horses I know are going to break down. I can see it's 500 pictures per second. If you go to the movies, they're putting about 30 pictures or 34 pictures a second up on the screen. Still picture, nothing. Still picture, nothing. 34 times a second. If you can't see that that's what's happening, then you can't see it 500 pictures a second. And a lot of what I know is important is that's what you need. You cannot see it at 34 frames a second. You can't see it at 100 frames a second. And it's the difference between chicken shit and chicken salad. So, and they say, well, right now, 2 horses a day break down. It's a disgrace in the United States, right? And they're trying to change the track and do this and do that. But, over our career, almost nothing breaks down because we don't buy those horses that are at risk. We also invented a way to measure that. We found out that the bones, they weren't breaking down because they were lame, which everybody says, or because the racetrack, but they were breaking down because bones fatigue. When you bend a paperclip back and forth, eventually it breaks. Well, bone is what we found out was much more elastic than people thought, and it was fatiguing and healing itself in a week-to-week cycle. Now that's been verified by other research, what we found. And so we invented a mold ultrasound machine with a professor from MIT and got patents and figured out so we could measure where they were in that fatigue cycle. And we got so in a machine, an Enstrom unit at MIT, we could predict when the bone, which series of forces simulating a race, when it would break. So then we went to Philly Turner's barn and we were doing it there. And then we had a big meeting with doctors to see what we should do. And they said, if you can do that, everything else they're doing with bones is indirect measure, density about breaking strength. You're measuring breaking strength directly, elastic modulus, speed of sound. You can diagnose osteoporosis, contact a big pharma. So we did. J&J bought it. They spent $6 million. They got 5 more patents. And it got FDA clinical approval in the 90s. It won a medical device award in Europe. But they controlled it. I had no more control. And they never brought it back to horses. But that was another thing we invented. Right now the company that had it isn't doing it. I don't know why anymore. But now some of the original patents have expired. So this is my chance to go in, patent the horse version of it, and start it up again, and see if I can make another difference in the racehorse industry by stopping these breakdowns. Right now, everything is trying to prevent lame horses from running or trying to make the track safer, but it won't work because that's not why they break down. It's because they're the wrong spot in that bone fatigue cycle. I could go on for hours about this stuff. I did everything. I even walked behind horses going to the paddock before a race and weighed the poop if they pooped, because people were fighting over a pound on the jockey. And here they are pooping out, 10 pounds of manure on the way. It was live weight, not dead weight, but even so. And then we invented the first aerodynamic silks. They're out there with these big flapping silks. We put them on in wind tunnels on horse mannequins. We found out that the flapping silks and all that shit was equivalent of 5 pounds of dead weight while they're killing themselves over a pound. So we made like what they had for the bobsleigh guys, these skin tight things. And we were using them for a year, and we had them on a horse in the Breeders' Cup, the World Championship in the paddock. And some lady from Danskin said she had just invented them, and she got Sports Illustrated to cover, and they did all this whole thing. And nobody noticed there was another horse in the same goddamn race with all the reporters there who was wearing aerodynamic silks, and from a company that had been selling them for a year. So that pissed me off. I thought, well, that's great research, guys. Good journalism. But that's pretty much the way it's been. You look at our track record, go to our website. All these horses we bought, what they did, what we paid for them, where we bought them, it's all there. And you can download a number of the scientific papers with mountains of data. And the guys who helped in the leading scientific journals refereed, and they hated me because I don't have a degree in vet medicine or engineering. So they thought I was going to be full of shit. I had to jump through so many hoops to get through their experts in those journals. But I mean, how many people in the racehorse business, I don't know, don't even know me, or they think I have theories. It's an interesting theory. And I'm thinking, unbelievable, surreal, unbelievable.
Yeah.
But that I used to drive me crazy. But then I thought, great. I'm going to keep this advantage. I'm going to keep pounding it. Why not? So I don't try to, I haven't been publicizing much lately, although right now I would like to replace the Egyptian genius I had. So that's where I am.
Yeah.
And I think, as an alternative investment, if you just buy one or two horses, it's going to cost you about $4,000, $5,000 a month with a decent trainer at a major racetrack. You're going to spend $40,000 to $100,000 for a horse that has a shot. And your odds stink. So, but it's fun. And it's a lottery ticket, But if you buy a stable of them, I know our odds. I know we've proven them more than once. If you buy a stable of them, if you can make the investment to make it, then, it's not so ridiculous and it's not so wild and it's a lot of fun. And so that's that. And I love the horses. I talk too much. I know I go on and on. But
no, that's it's an incredible story. I mean, everything from you kind of candidly say, I was into wrestling, and then part of your story was, I almost was in the Olympics. So, and the guy, I guess that went instead of you actually placed in the Olympics. Is that what you said?
Yeah, no, the guy won the gold medal, and he's a legend.
Oh
I was an interesting case because I was a college wrestler. In those days, the AAU and the college was, and the NCAA, they didn't get along. So college wrestlers couldn't be eligible. You had to go to the AA, put on a different uniform and pretend wrestling club and go to their stuff. And there were different rules. So in the Olympics, you never had to start down. I was shitty from starting in the down position. But I was great on my feet. I took everybody down. So I would take them down and let them up, blow up the points. And I didn't have to go down on the mat. And so even though I didn't have a great college record, I qualified in the AAU tournaments. And I wasn't going to make the team, especially not with a gold medal guy. I was 145 pounds and I was starving myself. I weigh 225 now. So, but I loved it. I loved it. And it taught me a lot about sports at high level. I knew something about elite athletes, what it takes, what's different. So,
and what do you think caused some of the kind of contrary views that you had as far as racehorses, and knowing that there were other things that you could look at besides just?
Well, I was stupid enough to always say, "How do you know?" So I would I was trying to learn and go reading the Bible, and I'd say, "How do they know?" When I did research, nobody had the data on elite racehorses or even race. And then when I started, I'd like their heart rate meter, all these experts and cardiologists, and they gave me completely bullshit information. And then the more I went along, the more I thought, I've got to just keep asking, how the hell do you know? Because they don't. And so then I decided nobody knew what they were doing. They were doing it the same way as 300 years ago. Pedigree was king. 95% or more of these $1 million stallions that guys paid, $200,000 a pop for stud fees. 95% or more of the offspring are not really good horses. So how can that be that? How can it be that? How can it be? Who can make money that way? Who wants to do? I guess if you don't give a shit, if you can buy a $2 million automobile and, live in a $20 million house, what do you care? But my Egyptian guy cared. He wanted to be the smart. And so did I. Plus, I always thought maybe I can democratize this here. I don't know. And, I think along the way, we've helped the horses because it's a better veterinary understanding. In the early time, they were saying, what do you know about the gait? I remember I was trying to give a paper and they were saying, what the hell do you know? So I got pissed off. So the next symposium, I did a gait on the basic gait of thoroughbred racehorses and at high speed, because all the literature, all the textbook were wrong. And I had the data at that point, it was 12,000 horses over 10 years and 500 frames a second on everything. And I had killed it. And I proved my point. They were talking about there was one airborne phase and there are 3 airborne phases when they're rocking and rolling and in the stride. And so that got their attention. I said, yeah, all you gait experts are so fucking kept. You don't even know the basic gait. You don't even know the basic gait of a good racer. So after that, I don't know, some of the vets started taking me seriously. But the pedigree guys, man, if I'm right, every farm in Kentucky is at risk of having all their inventory devalued immensely, like that poor Egyptian guy when the Egyptian pound went down 50% overnight. So, I'm not a popular thought in the breeders group.
Yeah, I'm sure. Makes total sense, though. Yeah.
We're doing DNA now. So, what the guys selling DNA, they were selling the speed gene. There was somebody from Ireland who had 179 horses from one trainer, and they did the study, and they came up with the speed gene. Well, first of all, environment is a big deal on what's turned on or turned off. So 179 horses in one stable with one trainer is ridiculous, although they've done more now. Secondly, the idea that there's a speed gene, like there's a health gene. There isn't. There's too many variables. But what we could do is when we found out that the thickness of the left ventricle of these horses was a big deal in predicting, and we found out things about the gait and the diameter of their spleen. So we could take the DNA of them and we could get markers for that. So now we can go after horses that are babies and we can know whether they're going to pass tests for confirmation, for the diameter of the spleen, for the size of the diaphragm, for the ejection fraction of their hearts. We can know that stuff now. With the DNA, we're getting that stuff now. And, but nobody, but the other companies selling their speed gene, now they're making a lot of money. They're selling what they think are feeds that help turn on the gene. I don't know. But, our stuff we haven't even marketed yet. But I know it's what's going to be the future. And it costs a fortune and it took a long time. So on any of that, on any of the different tests and, the various methods that you're using, I mean, have you patented any of that stuff? It sounded like you did at least one of them. We filed a number of patents. There were patents on gait. There were patents on the heart stuff. And there's going to be more patents to come. Some of it we didn't want to patent because we have to give away too much in the patent application. So we filed, do a trade secret and copyright. And I don't know. But some of our heart scan stuff, like I say, there's other people out there who read our published articles, but we had to do it to legitimize it. And there's a ton of data in there. So now they think they can do it. They don't have enough data. They don't have experience doing it. They do a half-ass job. And people think they're going to pick a horse based on a heart. So of course that doesn't work because it's only one variable. So they get discredited pretty fast. But, so I don't know that and there was a patent on that, but we couldn't, we would have to prove when they would hide in the stall doing what the hell they did with the computer. I gave up. They won't even give us credit. I wrote them some letters. I said, I know you're using our process. You're selling it. I said, at least give us credit that you're using our, no, they wouldn't do it. They said, oh no, somebody else invented it, which was just a bullshit, a blatant lie, but money. The horse race business has got some wonderful people and some real rascals. And it's still a Damon Runyon show, the guys and dolls, princes and knaves.
And what about on the on the frames? Is that still, are people still looking at? You mentioned some of the equipment that you were using to kind of freeze frame it and be able to see. You're looking at stride? You're looking at what are some of the things that you're kind of
we go
monitoring?
and look at the horse standing, conformation, and walking. and how they walk front, back, side, and how they're put together, the angles, the sizes, the shapes. And then when they're breezing with a jockey on their back, we take that apart. What they've copied us now. Even the auction companies now provide videos, but they don't go fast enough. They provide you with the 34 frames a second. So even if you slow it down and everything goes to fuzz, you can't see what you need. There's another company out there that does it fast enough. They use about 250 and they provide those films. But, there's nobody in that company ever did research or published anything. Nobody has any veterinary or engineering credentials. They haven't even ridden racehorses or trained them. And I looked at some of the reports and and they get the wrong data. They just get the wrong hands. They don't get the stride length right some of the time. So, but at least they've got the right filming now. Now they're going fast enough with film, and they sell that if somebody wants to look at it. Yeah. How do they know what to look at? I'll give you an example. There's things that are in the leg bends. If you see the leg like back in a banana the wrong way, imagine you're standing facing you, and your leg is bending backward like a banana toward the back and up from your weight on it. So it looks like your whole leg is going to snap. And a horse has a number of bones in its knees, and they chip them, and that's why. Some of these horses, they do that every stride. So people look at the things that are wrong, like that, and maybe they'll realize that could be a problem, right? But there's other things that they do that are, when you see it, and it's clear in the super slow motion, that look awful. They look like they're going to break their leg, and it's not. It's natural, and not only is it natural, but it's a predictor of how much force they're able to do, shoving themselves forward. So it's good. See, you see all these crazy shit. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. How do they know? Or they'll tell me, well, he's got a high action. He's going to be a turf horse. Well, the high action where they're throwing their legs all over the place is waste energy. It's dangerous. It's uncoordinated. That's great. But some of the best horses, Secretariat, they have so much power off their rear end. They push and they go up like a rocket. The whole front of the horse goes up in the air, including the legs. So they're not throwing their legs around. They're just rocketing off their rear ends with all that force. And so, and some people look at it and say, oh, well, look, he had a high action. I'm thinking, yeah, he sure does. But he's got the right high action. So it's just, again, I don't know. I stopped trying to persuade people. So that's when I said we have to have a track record. Now we have the track record, and they don't believe it, or you can go to 10 websites where people claim to have a track record, and if you check it out, it's not true, or they had a minor part in the whole thing, and somebody who was successful. So trying to distinguish us from the other guys is not easy, but it's, like I say, it's the difference between red meat and raw meat and roadkill.
Right, right.
And I said, well, why are you different? I said, it was easy. It only took 35 years and several $1 million of private research.
Right.
My code name in the wagering world, where I also did stuff, was Dogzilla, because I just keep at it. And when I did studies, I didn't do, 20 ponies on a lab, and I did 10,000 racehorses on major racetracks over 10 years, and I published it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I go on and on. What else would you like to know?
Well, no, it's very fascinating. I mean, it's a totally different things. There's so many variables, and so it's super interesting. But I guess, Jeff, tell me a little bit about what do you see for what do you see for yourself here in the next 3-5 years? I mean, what is it you'd like to get another? Sounds like another Egyptian investor.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting old. I think this is my last shot around. I'd like to do it one more time, make somebody the leading stable and get another Triple Crown winner. I'd like to go one more time around. But in the meantime, I'm happy to help the little guy buy his $40,000 horse with a much better chance, much less money, with a much better chance from these auctions, to the extent somebody finds me and calls me out and just wants to buy a horse. Yeah. And I explain, I explain to them what we're doing and why, and help them with the management of the horse. The management is just as important as the horse. We've had people, we bought a lot of really nice horses, and they couldn't do squat with them because their trainer was mediocre and they wanted to manage it all themselves. It's like, so you're putting, a raw novice in charge of the the operation. That doesn't work. It's just, there's so many things that can go wrong after you own the horse. They need to, we've got the same kind of expertise to help manage the horse if they'll let us. So that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
So I want to do it one more time with an Egyptian. And in the meantime, I'd like to buy whoever wants to come and have some fun with them winning some races.
That's awesome. So, and you'll do it. You'll do it for sure. You got the experience. So, Jeff, how can people find out more about you if they do want to connect with you?
Well, the email is jseder@eqb.fyi. The website is EQB, like Echo Queen Bravo, Equine Biometrics @FYI, not .com. And if you contact us, we will send, and on our website, you can get the information about the horses we bought under track record. You can download scientific papers to see what that is from the journals. And we can send you copies of all the different articles about us from magazines and journals. And we can send you the New York, front page center New York Times article the day before that Triple Crown win about us, and a picture of me, and when you turn into the middle of it. So we have references, and don't hire anybody without checking out what they tell you. It's not in the racehorse business.
Right. Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. That's great. Well, this has been really cool, man. I appreciate Jeff you being on the show and just opening our eyes to some other options that are out there. And I encourage anybody that's interested certainly to reach out to you. One question I have also is just so if you're buying horse from some of these whether it be auctions, whether it be whatever. Are they open to allowing you to do some of these tests? And
they were in the beginning, but now because we've been a high roller buying a lot of horses every year, they know we're for real, and they want to sell our horse or wouldn't be there. So they know we've never had a accident, never hurt a horse. So they let us do it now.
Okay. No, that's good to hear. Well, this has been great. I appreciate it. I do have two other questions for you that we asked every guest. And, one of them is just if you have any advice for somebody who's maybe just starting out in their investment journey, whether it be racehorse investing or investing in general.
Well, I think part of what made me is asking, how do you know? When you're looking into something, ask them. And because don't assume that they know for a good reason. If they give you sources, check them out. You may find out big surprises. I think that's number one. As an alternative, I wouldn't recommend horse racing for somebody who's not a high net worth individual who it's not the core of his protecting his entire net worth, but as a sideline and as an alternative. I don't think it's silly because we've been able to make money for people and have a lot of fun. So, I guess that's it. I say, and that would be it. That's my advice. All through the investing process, I think you always have to ask all along the way, how do you know when they tell you something? It's supposed to be a fact.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And I agree. Probably not, the best first investment for somebody, but it sounds like a heck of a lot of fun. And, for the right individual that like you said, high net worth individual, really cool avenue to have some fun with and make some money.
It's not $1 billion like the NBA. It's only like 20 million.
Yeah, exactly. And how about what about book recommendation? Anything you read? It doesn't have to necessarily be recently, but just something that's been impactful. It doesn't have to be investment related, but certainly can be.
Well, if they haven't read Seabiscuit, it's a terrific written story, and it captures a lot of the why we do it and what's going on.
Yeah, that's great. Great recommendation.
So.
Well, cool, Jeff. Well, this has been great, man. I appreciate it. And I know we kind of missed each other last time, but I've enjoyed this. This has just been really cool to kind of take a look into the world of horse racing. And appreciate doing it with you.
For having me. And sometime you should visit our farm.
Yeah, absolutely.
in
Where is
Pennsylvania?
your farm?
It's halfway between Philadelphia and Lancaster in southeastern Pennsylvania. It's the heart of steeplechase country.
Okay.
It's more racehorses in our little section of that county per capita than almost anywhere else in the United States, but it's a kind of a secret.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful, very horsey place.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Appreciate you.
Okay.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.